Now, there has certainly been a lot of debate and discussion around the Phantom Menace over the years. How good or bad it is Jar Jar Binks maybe the worst character in all of Star Wars, or maybe not all that bad after all, if not even enjoyable? Some will even go so far as to say the movie isn't even needed, that there were better ways to kick off the Star Wars prequel trilogy, that it doesn't really accomplish a whole lot for the greater story and could theoretically be skipped entirely, or Episode 1 should have just been something different. And though, no, The Phantom Menace is not a perfect movie, and I can understand the issues some people have with it, I have some of my own, but I do still really enjoy the movie and think there is a rather important point or lesson in there that, honestly, I don't generally see people talking about. For whatever reason, it is not necessarily missed, but I think it's one of the biggest things George Lucas wanted people to take away from the whole story of the prequel trilogy, and it rarely ever gets brought up. Though, first of all here, let's quickly ask the question, what exactly does The Phantom Menace accomplish or establish for the overall story? What do we learn in this film that is important to what is going to come next? Could it even be skipped? Should it have been something else? And, well, there is the obvious stuff, like it shows how Palpatine manipulates his way to the top, that he even uses his own people to attain power, which, to play both sides a bit here, you could argue is important because it sets the stage for how he'll become Emperor, how he took his first step. Yet you could also say we knew Palpatine is a really, really bad guy, and learning how he used his own people to become Supreme Chancellor isn't really all that surprising. I mean, just look at how he treats his people when he is Emperor. And if he had started out as Chancellor, if the trilogy had, say, started with Episode 2, I don't know that we would have been all that upset that we didn't know exactly how he had gotten into that position. We would have just assumed that, yeah, he probably did some shady stuff along the way. Moving on though, The Phantom Menace also shows us how Anakin Skywalker was initially found, how he comes to be trained by Obi-Wan Kenobi, which, sure, I've always liked that scene where Qui-Gon introduces the two of them, and I think it's kind of cool to see just how they find each other or the circumstances that bring them together. I think it's also interesting that, in a sense, Obi-Wan was forced or made a promise to train Anakin, that it wasn't quite as simple as Obi-Wan made it sound in Return of the Jedi when he talks to Luke about how I took it upon myself to train your father as a Jedi, as if it was just something he decided on all on his own, and now has maybe some regrets about that choice. Yet again, at the same time, maybe that explanation from Obi-Wan in Return of the Jedi works just fine. Maybe if again Episode 2 had kicked off the trilogy and we see Obi-Wan already training Anakin, we wouldn't have questioned it all that much. We wouldn't be asking how did they meet, we would just be accepting it because, of course, Anakin is Obi-Wan's apprentice or Padawan. Something else we then learn in The Phantom Menace is that Anakin is the Chosen One, which adds a whole new dynamic to his story and the story of Star Wars in general. Well, sort of anyway, we never do learn what the prophecy actually said, only that, as Yoda tells us at one point, it may have been misread. Which, interestingly enough, is only one of 2 times outside of The Phantom Menace where it's even mentioned. The other is at the very end of the whole trilogy after the duel between Anakin and Obi-Wan. Other than that, it kind of feels like an afterthought in the films, to be completely honest with you, and I don't know that if it was removed, that it would really change much of anything about the story, or would it? We'll get into that in just a minute or two. Furthermore here, when it comes to what does the Phantom Menace actually accomplish, well, Qui-Gon gives us a great example of what the Jedi should be, how they should simply follow the will of the Force, which has seemingly put him at odds with the Council, a council that is attached to the hip of the Republic and the Senate, which all begins to lay the groundwork for problems with the Jedi Order later on, or how they will get caught up in the Clone Wars. Plus it does begin to show us kind of how aloof and a bit arrogant the Jedi are becoming, which will also be an issue. There are then a few other rather important things you could argue that the movie does or establishes. It shows us that there are problems within the Republic. It is a basic setup for this separatist movement we'll see in the next film, I'd say. Again, it doesn't go into any great detail about why trade routes in dispute led to many systems eventually breaking away, but we can assume there's a correlation there, or that this is the start of or continuation of many different issues that will eventually break the Republic apart. The film then also introduces us to Padme, the eventual mother of Luke and Leia, and shows us how Anakin helped her when he was just a kid by winning that pod race, and sort of helped her save all of her people by accident when he blew up the droid control ship, Though I've seen some argue, and I've actually made the argument myself, that maybe Anakin should have been a bit older, closer to Padme's age, that it would have worked a bit better if perhaps both of them were in their mid to late teens, and if maybe Hayden Christensen had played Anakin from the very start. However, there was a point to Anakin being so young. In fact, it's tied directly into the one I mentioned at the start, what is, in a sense, the whole point of starting the trilogy with the Phantom Menace, with Anakin being so young. That being, it shows us that anyone can fall to the dark side. Anyone can turn evil and become Darth Vader. Even a seemingly altruistic boy who only ever thinks of others and has a heart of pure gold, despite a rough childhood, despite having grown up as a slave, they can still go on to become one of the two most evil people in the entire galaxy. This movie shows us that Darth Vader was not born Darth Vader. He was made, that he became Darth Vader, that he came about primarily because of the choices made by Anakin Skywalker. That evil is a choice, with George Lucas himself even saying once that nobody wakes up saying, I'm going to be evil today. It is a slow process where you compromise a little bit here, a little bit there, until you're doing things you never thought you would. Furthermore, and on a different occasion, Lucas also said, Anakin becomes Vader because he gives in to his anger and fear, and that's a choice anyone can make. Once you start down that path, it's hard to come back. And I even think, going back to the Chosen One prophecy and how, again, it doesn't seem to have much of a place or purpose in the films when you really stop and think about it, but I think the reason Lucas included it was to emphasize his point that anyone, literally anyone, can do bad things or become an evil person. That no one is immune to the power of the dark side. Even someone destined to do good, destined to destroy the Sith and bring balance to the galaxy, can fall and become the very thing they swore to destroy. That there's a Darth Vader inside all of us that we must keep at bay. That all of us are capable of great evil, which was also emphasized in Yoda's story arc in Season 6 of the Clone Wars. That we cannot destroy the evil within us. We can only remain vigilant and keep it at bay by making the right choices in life. That the dark side is selfishness, and the opposite of that, the way to combat it, is to be compassionate. Along with all this then, I also think that the prophecy, whatever it technically said, was not misread in any way, shape, or form. No, it was just wrong about the choice or choices Anakin would eventually make. Because I do believe he was destined to destroy the Sith. That's what the Force created him for. And I don't mean he was destined to fall to Darth Vader and destroy the Sith that way. He was just destined to be trained by, more than likely, Qui-Gon until Darth Maul caused some problems there. He was destined to become the one who would destroy the Sith, but again, choices and the choices of the Sith as well changed his fate until his fate became becoming Darth Vader, which is one of the things I do love about Star Wars and what I talk about ad nauseum on this channel, that it all boils down to the choices of individuals, that the choices we make impact our own lives and the lives of those around us, and sometimes the entire galaxy, or in our case, maybe the whole planet. And so the Phantom Menace shows us that someone who starts out as a child with nothing but the absolute best of intentions can slip and fall to the dark side and even become someone as bad as Darth Vader. That is the true purpose of that movie, to show us just how far Anakin Skywalker fell, and just how far any of us could fall if we let selfishness always guide our actions and impact the choices we make, instead of having at least a bit of compassion for others, trying to always be a bit more selfless, not always being selfless. We are always going to be selfish to a degree, but if we become nothing but selfishness, we become the very epitome of the dark side. We become Darth Vader. Well, that's going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn. Take to the comments below and tell me what you think about this one. Could the Phantom Menace just be removed? Was it the wrong way to start the prequel trilogy? Or do you think it's an important part of the story, that there is a valuable lesson in there to be learned? Whatever the case may be though, leave your comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.